High school teachers have read it. What's the most awkward position a student has ever put you in? Story 1. At my school, there was a young boy in a dance class who was about to take part in an upcoming performance. He had to wear skin-tight leggings, which meant he would need a support, like a heavy-duty support G-string underneath to keep everything in place. Unfortunately, my school wasn't a specialty dance school and we didn't have many male students, so this was a situation I never encountered before. We had to make a trip to the dance shop and it was decided that the school would purchase the support for him. As a result, I had to make an awkward phone call to the student's mother to explain why I was buying her son a G-string. Story 2. My English teacher was left speechless a few years ago when one day during class, a student raised her hand and asked if she could go to the bathroom. In a little bit was the teacher's response. However, only 5 minutes later, the student raised her hand again. "I'll write you a pass right now," the teacher said. But the student replied, "Never mind, it went back in." The look of shock and confusion on my teacher's face was priceless. Story 3. After school, a student from my world history class came to my classroom to make up an exam. I looked up and noticed that her shirt was unbuttoned almost to her waist. The scarf around her gave the impression that nothing was wrong, yet I couldn't help but feel that the school had sent her as a test of my integrity as a male teacher. The situation was rather awkward. Story 4. I teach English in Germany, and sometimes literal translations of words can lead to misunderstandings. One such instance occurred when we were discussing going to the beach. One of my students asked why she couldn't say, "I creamed my pants." In German, when one applies sun lotion, they say, "Ich creme mich," which is literally translated as, "I cream myself." This led to a native English speaker friend of hers jokingly saying she would never say, "I creamed my pants" in English without offering any explanation. Of course, she asked me, her English teacher, in front of the entire class, and soon enough, everyone was demanding to know why. I blushed and requested an early break. Story 5. One day in high school, 2 of my classmates asked a teacher, a young and attractive blonde woman, if they could go back to the classroom because they had forgotten their books. She handed them the keys to the classroom and they returned to find her phone sitting on her desk. Without hesitating, they opened it, went through her messages, and found some nudes she had sent to her husband. In a cruel act of revenge, they forwarded the pictures to the entire male student body. A couple of weeks later, she was arrested for a DUI and was forced to resign from the school due to personal issues. It was an unfortunate outcome for a woman who had not done anything wrong and was a genuinely nice person. Story 6. At middle school, sex education was being taught, and the teacher was advocating for abstinence until marriage. One of the students, however, noticed that the teacher was still single and decided to ask him if he was a virgin. This left the teacher in an uncomfortable situation as he was unable to decide if it was worse to admit to being a hypocrite or to admit that at 40 years of age, he was still a virgin. His face turning bright red, the teacher let the students out for recess earlier than usual. Story 7. While discussing a topic on sexual assault in my police investigations course, the instructor posed a question to the class. What type of evidence could be left behind on a condom? His granddaughter, who was also in the class, quickly raised her hand and suggested that DNA could be found in saliva. The instructor then asked her to elaborate. In response, she acted out the scenario by mimicking the action of ripping open a condom packet with her mouth, which demonstrated the potential for salivary evidence. I was taken aback by the demonstration. Story 8. On this day, the principal was observing my English class in Japan, where we were going over adjectives. When I asked the students to draw something related to the adjective cheap, some drew erasers or candy, but one student had something different in mind, a stick figure with an afro. Upon seeing this, my initial reaction was shock, as I'm an American. However, since the principal was present, I had to remain professional. When I asked the student why he decided to draw this, he explained that he had learned about slavery in the U.S. and the cost associated with it. Story 9. My mother, a high school teacher, had to give a phone call to a parent because their child had been misbehaving in her class. Despite all the excuses and denials of the parents, my mother laid out the consequences that would come with detention. Unfortunately, she had accidentally left it on speakerphone, and another teacher commented on the futility of the call. To which my mother jokingly replied, "Yeah, well, that little shit's probably going to be cleaning toilets for the rest of his life anyway." Of course, the parent was still on the line, and an apology had to be made soon after. Story 10. I had a student come to me in the back of the classroom, quietly confiding that she was having trouble focusing due to a UTI. After class, I approached her to make sure she was doing okay. Knowing the sensitivities of the conversation town we were in, I had to tread delicately when conveying the importance of peeing after sex and always using protection. As a male, I didn't want to get into any trouble for advocating anything other than abstinence, but I wanted to ensure the student was informed and safe. Story 11. I, a 28-year-old gay man, was teaching a middle school class one day when one of my female students came to me and said she had to go to the bathroom. When she returned, she told me in front of the entire class that she had just gotten her very first period. She was frantic, not knowing what to do, and in a great deal of discomfort. You could see the blood on her clothing. I calmly reassured her and told her to go to the school nurse. Although I had no idea how to handle the situation, I put on a brave face and encouraged her not to be embarrassed. To my student, Brittany, it's okay if you cringed a little at having to tell your gay teacher and the rest of the class that you had just started your journey into womanhood. I now keep pads on my desk. Story 12. When I was a sophomore in high school, smartphones had just begun to gain traction. My buddy asked me to send him a picture to set as his caller ID. Without hesitation, I sent him a picture of my nut bag. Much to my surprise, he actually used it as his caller ID. A couple of weeks later, our history teacher caught him with his phone out and confiscated it until the end of class. When he sat the phone down on his desk, I saw my opportunity and called my buddy's phone. The phone went off and, much to my horror, a picture of my nut bag with my name underneath it popped up. Our teacher gave me a look of pure hatred, took my phone away, and returned my buddy's phone. Story 13. I had a habit of asking my fourth period teacher, who was also my cross-country coach, for permission to go to the restroom before class started. I did this so if I was ever late, I would be excused. After about 3 months of this, one day the teacher said to me, "Baker, 2002, why don't you just stop at the bathroom on your way instead of coming to class first?" Being the smart aleck I am, I responded without thinking, "Because I want to think about you first." I immediately knew I said something wrong, as the entire class erupted in laughter and the teacher was left speechless. I knew I was in trouble. Story 14. Our professor was an incredibly kind-hearted and caring individual who also happened to be the head football coach. He was going over our tests with us, giving us the chance to ask questions and clear up any confusion we had with our grades. One student then posed a rather ingenious question. Could he get the same answer if he used multiple equations instead of just one? The professor was amazed. He'd never even considered that possibility. The student then went on to explain his method, and the professor wrote it all out on the board, which indeed proved that it was a viable solution. As a reward, the teacher gave the student back the points he'd lost on that question. Story 15. Each year in elementary school, our teacher would arrange for a dentist to come and visit us. They'd bring a variety of dental hygiene products and demonstrate how to use them properly. To emphasize the importance of good teeth, they would always bring a big denture and a giant toothbrush. We were constantly reminded to brush from red to white. One year, I had an idea and asked our teacher, who was in her early 30s and a coffee lover and smoker, if the phrase should be brushing from red to yellow. She took me outside the class and explained why this was inappropriate.